All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's Keith Stelman with the National Weather Service in Peachtree City. This is a special weather briefing for the cold and the winter weather expectations for this week on Monday, January 20th. All right, so the main points in the headlines. First point is we do expect winter weather to impact the state Tuesday into Wednesday morning. And obviously the details are still working themselves out, but a winter storm watch is in effect from 10 a.m. tomorrow morning until 7 a.m. Wednesday, generally along and south of 85. It does include the Atlanta Metro and maybe a county or two to the north and the west of the 85 corridor. For winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings, which will be the next phase of this when we go from the watch, want to make a very important point here in that travel impacts will be the primary concern regardless of whether you're in an advisory or a warning, given the concern of the cold surface temperatures with any snow amount. So we've seen this in the past. When it snows, when temperatures are in the 20s, impacts on roadways shortly follow very quickly after the onset of precipitation. And so that's sort of the situation we're dealing with here. And so I don't want to get too locked on the totals on the snows and who's going to see it, but because the impacts are going to happen shortly after the onset of any precipitation, given the cold temperatures at the surface. We do still have uncertainties in the snow amounts, although there still remains a possibility of a brief period of lighter snow along the northern edge. Most of the uncertainty around this forecast does extend to the northern extent and the northwestern edge of this particular forecast. That is where we've put a lot of effort into trying to focus, but also where still a lot of the uncertainty remains. Switching to the cold, we do expect cold conditions to continue into Thursday. A cold weather advisory will likely be needed for areas along and north of I-85 tonight, and we are expecting an extended period of below normal temperatures through the week, including very cold overnight temperatures. So that parlays into the precip aspect of this, in that areas that do get snow would most likely experience a refreeze, a thaw, refreeze during the day, thaw during the day, refreeze overnight. Obviously, we'll pay attention to that and how that evolves through the week as well. So the last point of this is continue to monitor the forecast carefully and through the onset of precipitation into tomorrow. All right, so on to the next slide. This is the Tuesday morning and Tuesday evening weather map, sort of the national scale. We're expecting the storm system in the Gulf in combination with the Arctic air that's moved in across basically the whole lower 48 to start developing overnight tonight into tomorrow morning, back across the Gulf Coast states, Texas, Louisiana, and then spread northeast. As you can see by Tuesday evening, which is basically a culmination of from Tuesday morning into Tuesday evening, the national map does overspread the snow across much of Georgia all the way down to the Georgia-Florida line. The northwest and the northern extent of this is where the greatest uncertainty is. And so, again, I mentioned that on the last map. And so I will talk about that a little bit in this briefing as well. So let's talk about the cold temps first. Here are the minimum apparent temperatures or wind chills expected overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. Widespread 10 to 15 degrees along and north of I-20, with single digits in the northwestern part of the state. Pretty high confidence that at least 15 degrees or below temperatures in the area highlighted in the box there. Again, cold weather advisory is going to be needed. This could extend into Wednesday morning as well. We'll just have to see how everything plays out with the snowpack, because that will have an effect on temperatures going into Wednesday. And then by Thursday, we do expect temperatures to rebound on Thursday, maybe back into the 40s and by 50s this weekend. But we still will have overnight temperatures that are pretty cold going through the week. So let's dive into that a little bit. Tomorrow's high temperature, looking at low to mid 30s in the I-85 corridor, pretty much 30s area wide, with temperatures not getting above freezing in the northern counties, northern, say, 3 counties, with a sort of a northwest to southeast gradient. Keep in mind that the temps tomorrow will most likely be the highest during the afternoon hours if precip doesn't occur sooner. If we get precip shield that moves in earlier in the day, these high temps are going to be too warm, and we may end up with lower high temperatures tomorrow. That'll just depend on when the precip moves in, and I cover that a little bit later. Tomorrow night's low temperatures, you can see on the right-hand side there, we have teens across the I-20 corridor, maybe near 20 down in the Macon to Columbus region, maybe even teens all as far south as Americus, with single digits in the far north Georgia mountains to about 10 degrees or so. Moving into Wednesday, high temperatures on Wednesday, maybe reaching into the middle 30s with overnight lows Wednesday night into Thursday morning, back down to around 20 degrees. The caveat here on Wednesday will be any existing snowpack and what limitations it may have on high temperatures. Just keep in mind that the models that go into forecasting temperatures are inclusive of models that produce no snow. So if we do get snow, temperatures would favor the models that actually show more snow, which are be on the lower end of this, and there always is a range. And so those temperatures could be a little on the warm side if we end up having more snow. So just keep that in mind for Wednesday. Thursday, you can see the rebound into maybe the low 40s on the southern end, maybe to near 40 on the north side, with overnight lows Thursday night back down into the 20s. And so the point of all of this is that any thawing during the day could potentially refreeze at night given the colder temperatures. And so, again, we'll just have to play that by ear and see how the winter precip unfolds over the next couple days. And then we've been showing this with the potential hours of temps at or below 32 through Thursday afternoon, with the greatest number of those hours along in north and west of 85, I-85, with the greatest number in North Georgia. From experience, past similar experiences have shown that we tend to get a lot of problems beginning around the 36 to 48 hour time period through 72. That's pipe bursting, even inside wall pipes, water mains, those kinds of things, especially with temps in the teens overnight, getting, I call that the harder freeze numbers. We tend to have a lot more pipe issues. And given that it does extend down into middle Georgia, and middle Georgia is well beyond that 48-hour threshold of below freezing temps, I would expect those impacts do extend pretty much area-wide for the potential for frozen pipes, etc. So take that and please push out the precautions and the safety precautions for long duration freeze. All right, so let's talk about the winter products here. This is the winter storm watch that's currently in effect. Up against Birmingham has issued a winter storm warning that goes as far as north as Columbus. For now, the area I've highlighted is the planned warning area. There's obviously a battleground there on the northern edge of this where we would transition over to maybe an advisory or an expected advisory area. So the northern extent of the watch, we're expecting to go with an advisory with a warning on the far south. It is purely a confidence thing with the higher confidence further south. The one thing I want to point out is we are still, at this point, about 24 hours away from precip onset. This could still change as additional model runs come in and have and start evaluating how much moisture return is coming in. So pay close attention to updates and trends, even through the overnight tonight. We'll reserve the right to upgrade anything to a warning overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning on that boundary line between advisory and warning, etc. So roughly along and south of Carroll to Hall County for the advisory area, we could see periods of snow becoming heavy at times, accumulations up to 2 inches particularly within the warning area, with some degree of flexibility along that boundary line. Not expecting a lot of ice and sleet, although there is potential on the far south end of the warning area say Maracus, Abbeville, over to Lyons, you could see some sleet and or freezing rain early on in the process tomorrow. But otherwise, we would expect most areas to get the majority of the precip to be snow. Plan on slippery, hazardous road conditions, which would impact both the afternoon and evening commutes and as well as any Wednesday morning commutes, since it would still be around into the early morning hours on Wednesday, given temperatures in the teens. So that's at least what we've got right now on the winter storm watch side of things and what we're at least expecting. We've still got the afternoon to collaborate with the neighbors and go on with the final decision. Snow probabilities, they have come down within the models. So the top left graphic is the probability of 1 inch of snow through Wednesday. There is still, when you look at the northern extent, the I-20 corridor, about a 25% chance of getting at least an inch of snow. It's a 1 in 4 chance. So it's still not out of the realm of possibilities with that extension all the way up, you say in the I-85 corridor from, say, Gainesville back over into, say, Carroll County, into Paulding County. You guys are the northern extent of that 15 to maybe 20% threshold. And so we'll just have to wait and see how this plays out and what the trends are with the probabilities. But the northern extent, obviously the uncertainty is there. Higher certainty, or at least a higher probability in middle Georgia with, say, a more confidence from a Columbus to Macon line and points further south, maybe all the way down to Albany, where the highest confidence is. And then the probability of at least 2 inches of snow, you can see it on the right-hand side. Again, there is probability all the way up into the I-20 corridor, but the highest probabilities are in that middle Georgia region, extending north and east from there. Impacts. This is the winter storm severity index and potential impacts from snow. Again, highlighting the greatest impact and the highest probability of impact along and south of 20. You can see, what is that value? Looks like 60 to 80% chance of at least minor impacts. It would be travel impacts along and south of 20. It's right in that I-20 corridor. It's in the 40 to 50, maybe 60% threshold, right in the I-20 corridor. And then it decreases with northward extent. And that has everything to do with whether or not we see any precip. The only thing I can caveat this with is when we go to the next slide, you'll see moderate impacts on the left-hand side. They do extend all the way well north of the Atlanta metro. And the reason for that is because if we see any snow, there will likely be impacts. And so the lower probability is coming from the low likelihood that we actually see any snowfall up there. But if we do, the impacts on roads will be the first thing that we see. And that has everything to do with the cold temperatures in place, not only today, but for the days lingering, and the cold temperatures of the ground level and the atmosphere during the time at which it snows as well. You look out on the right-hand side, that is the major impact. We're starting to get into more longer duration and road impacts. Obviously a focus where the greatest probability of snow is, but it does extend all the way to the I-20 corridor. And it's something we'll have to watch with at least a 10 to 20% chance or likelihood of impact. Again, corresponding to the probabilities of those snow totals as well, are closely tied to it. So the current forecast snow totals, and there may be some slight changes to this with the afternoon update, but you can see generally along and south of I-85, we have at least a little bit of snow, be up to an inch. We're saying less than an inch in that region, but up to an inch. There is an area on the north end of that. I'm going to cover that in the next slides. Along and north of 85, it's a lower confidence area. We may have to introduce snow there depending on the trends that we're seeing in some of the models, but that area would have the biggest risks of impacts with low snow totals because of how much colder it is on the northern extent of this. So your impacts would be felt fairly quickly if we do see any snow in that region on the north side. The circle in the middle, we are increasing some confidence that we'll get at least some snow Likely on that from that half an inch to an inch is possible for sure. And so there's a little more confidence in that region of at least seeing some travel impacts as a result of the increasing confidence that we're getting some snow in that region. And then obviously the circle to the south is where we have the highest confidence of at least seeing some snow, with expected impacts on travel to be the most certain thing in that region, along to the south. So the point I want to make with this is and the reason why we have such a lack of confidence in the snow totals is that the models, and I say all of them, it's pretty much all of them across the board, are having a hard time resolving the amount of liquid equivalent, or QPF. We call that the precip forecast. And that's because the snow to liquid ratios are very high in this environment, 10 to 15 times. So you take what amount of forecast liquid falls and you multiply it times 10 or 15, as high as 15, to get an actual snow amount. So a QPF forecast, or a rainfall forecast of 0.1 would equate to 1.5 inches of snow, as opposed to a forecast of 0.15 and you get 2.25 inches of snow. So just a change in 0.05 liquid equivalent or precip is magnified by almost an inch of snow. And it's because of that, and because of the models like struggling to figure out how much QPF we're going to get, it's why we're seeing these bouncing snow totals. So even the worst case scenarios could be underdoing some of the snow potential, just because of that multiplication factor, and whether or not the model is handling how much precip is actually going to fall out of the sky, and then convert to snow. So the one thing that has been limiting, and this is where the model is trying to reduce it, is there is dry air off the surface to about 3,000 or 4,000 feet. And that's where the struggle is it's trying to evaporate or disintegrate the snow that's falling from higher up in that layer just off the surface. And we're trying to monitor the trends in that forecast within that layer to figure out whether or not we're going to get any snow reaching the ground. And I think I'm going to cover that in the next couple of slides. But because of that, here are the low end and the high end snow potential. So the snow reasonable worst case is on the left. There's at least a 10% chance of seeing that much or more. And then obviously the best case, 10%, actually probably extends all the way up to 25% chance of seeing nothing at all. Although the probability is a little bit higher on the south end of this, of at least seeing something. But that's why we're concerned, is because there's still a potential for a higher end scenario, even though it's only about a 10% chance. And we just have to see how it plays out in the next 24 hours. So winter precip timing and uncertainty. I'm going to show you 3 different model runs and walk through them, because this really exemplifies where the models are struggling. And what I'm showing you on the left-hand side, it's one of our high-resolution models. It's the composite reflectivity. So if you were to look at a radar, this is what you would see on radar, irregardless of the precipitation type, from 10 to 11 a.m. This would be the earliest onset. This is earliest onset that some of the models are showing is in the late morning hours. From this model, on the left-hand side, you can see that it's trying to indicate that there's precipitation falling from the clouds. On the right-hand side, it's conversion to what precip type on the ground. In those same areas, it's not showing anything. And it's because the model is evaporating that precipitation as it's falling to the ground. And so our question and our dilemma has been, how much of that precip that's actually falling, and the models see it falling, is actually going to reach the ground as opposed to evaporating completely. And that's the big dilemma we have on the northern extent of this, is how much of that actually reaches the ground. So this is the same model at the same time. And you can see where it's most confident that snow is entering Georgia is in that Columbus, maybe up to Troup County region, in that 10 to 11 a.m. window time frame. However, on the left-hand side, it's precipitating even at higher levels all the way up to North Georgia. So it's a function of how much of that's reaching the ground. And that's what we're up against for tomorrow as the events unfolding. I'm going to show you in a later onset. This is just another model. We'll call it B, model B. Here is a 1 to 2 p.m. snapshot. It's a little bit later, a little bit delayed on the onset. Same thing on the left-hand side, composite reflectivity. Hey, I see rain falling from the sky. On the right-hand side, I'm not converting it to anything on the ground because I'm evaporating it. That's what it's trying to indicate here to us when we're looking at this. But nonetheless, it's trying to show it starting to enter potentially as early as 1 to 2. Again, same model. This would be sort of on that later onset time. But between the two, they're all in general agreement. The early is 9, the late is 3. So sometime during the day, the precip moves in to the western part of the state and quickly overspreads. Excuse me. Another model, and I'm just going to call this one C. The point I want to show with this one is that it is trying to capture a little more snow on the northern extent. I know I'm not talking a lot to the middle Georgia folks. You guys, we have the highest confidence that it's going to be coming in at that time because the bottle reflectivities down there are highest. But you can see there is a northern extent to this on the north side, between 1 to 2 moving in potentially. And I think I go the next model. Yep, that same model that I'm showing you here. I'm going to show you here as a worst case and our concern for that northern extent. This is 3 to 4 on the left and 5 to 6 on the right. So it is trying to indicate that the snow shield, we'll call it a snow shield, does extend further north into northern Georgia. And the concern here is that precip falling at that time is into temperatures at the surface in the 20s. I don't need to say much more than it would cause travel impacts fairly quickly after onset if that were to occur. And it happens to be during the daytime. So there is a back edge to this. It does have a little more northwest component to it. So it does see that snow reaching the ground. And then by 5 to 6 o'clock, you can see it's starting to shift south and east. And then the heaviest snow is obviously focused on the middle Georgia, again, where our confidence is higher, that there is at least some chance. Again, I'm showing you this as a potential worst case scenario for the snow and the snow extent. So 2 models here. This is the earliest reasonable time, and this is the composite reflectivity with the extent moving in around 9 a.m. So we're just focusing on the graphic on the left. This loop ends at 10 p.m. And the reason I picked that was because that's about when the backside of it's moving out of our eastern counties, sometime in that 9 p.m. to midnight time frame tomorrow night. Model on the right-hand side, a little more delayed. It does have a later start time with it moving in, and it does have more of a southern boundary to the snow, which is in that I-85, I-20 corridor, kind of where our watch is set up right now. It has a lot less reaching the ground than the model on the left. And it's a function of how much moisture the models are trying to introduce into the environment during the day tomorrow. Again, we'll continue to evaluate that as we move into the later today into tonight. So to wrap this up, winter storm watch likely be converted to advisories or warnings. And I want to reiterate that travel impacts will be the primary concern given the cold surface temperatures with both the winter storm warning and the advisories, particularly with any snow amount given the surface temperatures. We still have the uncertainty in the snow amounts. I just covered that. And we'll have to pay closer attention to the northern extent of this. Middle Georgia, we're a lot more confident that you're going to see an impactful snow. And that's why we're probably going to upgrade you to a warning later today. Continue to monitor the forecast carefully. We'll continue to send out email briefings. We are posting stuff in Slack. We did do a little bit deeper post, more technical in nature in Slack earlier. Hopefully with the TV Mets to explain some of these concerns that we have with the models and how they're trying to resolve this. But that will conclude this briefing. We are expecting additional briefings. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And on the many ways via email, phone, or Slack, especially Slack. It's a little easier for us to respond in there.